Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Srila Gaurkishore Das Paji Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Srila Satchidananda Bhaktivinoda Thakur Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasri Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Garanthraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Nitai Gaura Premanandi Hare Hare Bo. Glories some devotees. All glories some devotees. All glories some devotees. All glories Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories Shri Prabhupada. So this morning, reading from Canto 9, chapter number 13, the dynasty of Maharaj Nimi. Text number 5. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Jaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraya Nimi Pratidatau Shapam Guruve Adharma Bhartine Tavapi Patatad Deho Lobat Dharmam Ajanataha Nimi Pratitadau Shapam Nimi Pratitadau Shapam Guruve Dharmavartine Guruve Dharmavartine Tavapi Padatadeo Tavapi Padatadeo Loba Dharmana Janataha Loba Dharma Majanataha Nimi Pratitau Shapam Guruve Dharma Shvartine Tavapi Padatadeo Loba Dharma Majanata Nimi Pratitau Shapam Guruve Dharma Vartine Tavapi Padatadeo Loba Dharma Majanata Nimi Pratitau Shapam Guruve Dharma Vartine Tavapi Padatadeo Loba Dharma Majanata Nimi Pratitau Harpam Nimi Vartine Nimi pratito shapam Guruve Dhammavartane Tavapi Padatadeo Loba Dharma Majanataham Nimi Pratito Shapam Guruve Dhammavartane Tavapi Padatadeo Loba Dharma Majanataham. Someone else? So many Vaishnavas. Prabhupada says chant 10 times each verse. Nimi pratito shapam Guruve Dhammavartine Tavapi Padatadeo Loba Dharma Majanataham. Nimi pratito shapam Guruve Dhammasardane Bhavi Padatadeo Loba Dharma Janataham. Nimi pratito shapam Guruve Dhammavartane Tavapi Padatadeo Loba Dharma Majanataham. Ni pratito shapam Guruve Dhammavartine Tavapi Padatadeo Loba Dharma Majanataham. Matajis. Ni pratito dapam Guruve Dhammasardane Loba Dharma Majanataham. Nimi Maharaj Nimi Pratito Shapam Counter cursed Guruve unto his spiritual master Vasishta Adharmavartine, who was induced to irreligious principles because he cursed his offenseless disciple. Tava, of you, api, also, patata, let it fall, deha, the body, loba, because of greed, dharmam, religious principles, ajanada, not knowing. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. For unnecessarily cursing him when he had committed no offense, Maharaj Nimi countercursed his spiritual master. Quote, for the sake of getting contributions from the King of Heaven, he said, you have lost your religious intelligence. Therefore, I pronounce this curse. Your body also will fall. Purport. Now, can read each. Go line by line. For unnecessarily cursing him, when he had committed no offense, Maharaj Nimi countercursed his spiritual master. For the sake of getting contributions from the King of Heaven, he said, you have lost your religious intelligence. Therefore, I pronounce this curse. Your body also will fall. Purport. The religious principle for a Brahmana is that he should not be greedy at all. In this case, however, for the sake of more lucrative remunerations from the King of Heaven, Vasishtha neglected Maharaj Nimi's request on this planet. And when Nimi performed the sacrifices with other priests, Vasishtha unnecessarily cursed him. When one is infected by contaminated activities, his power, material or spiritual, reduces. Although Vasishtha was the spiritual master of Maharaj Nimi, because of his greed, he became fallen. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. So this previous verse we should also remember. After completing the sacrificial performances for King Indra, the spiritual master Vasishtha returned and found his disciple Maharaj Nimi had disobeyed his instructions. Thus Vasishtha cursed him, saying, quote, "May the material body of Nimi, who considers himself learned, immediately fall." So when it says fall, it means die. They both killed each other in this exchange. And then later on, in a couple verses from now, Vasishtha, no, I guess it's the next verse then, it's mentioned how Vasishtha takes birth again. But Maharaj Nimi, he doesn't want to take birth again because he doesn't want to be imprisoned in a material body. So, ordinarily, one should not disobey the orders of one's spiritual master. In fact, that's an offense against the holy name, to disobey the orders of the spiritual master. This word guru is actually clearly mentioned here in the verse, Gurave Nimi Pradidao Shapam Gurave Dharmavartine. But the problem is, this guru was no longer guru anymore. He is a Dharmavartine. He had been reduced to irreligious principles. But you can see Maharaj Nimi was in a very difficult situation. He had to make some judgment. We don't get any information here, but it's very easy in such a situation. You think, oh, my guru is following a dharma, therefore I'm going to disobey his orders, or even curse him to die. Who would want to curse his spiritual master to die? Very difficult situation Maharaj Nimi must have been in. First of all, he has to understand the truth that this Vasishtha is no longer spiritual master. He's a Dharmavartine, someone who is induced to irreligious principles. That takes a lot of intelligence. Spiritual life is not a simple thing, not just a matter of blind following. One has to have intelligence. You see, though, the problem is that it was all about money. The king of heaven, Indra, was going to give him a lot of money for doing this sacrifice. So therefore, he went where the money was. And for that reason also, he became contaminated by power, you could say, or he's infected, Prabhupada is saying, he's infected by contaminated activities. So therefore, Vasishtha was not actually a qualified spiritual master. We have other cases of this coming up in Vedic literature, of the spiritual master no longer being the spiritual master anymore, and of one having to actually disobey the orders of the spiritual master. These are, of course, exceptions. No one should take this thinking, okay, my spiritual master has told me to do something, now I'm going to disobey his orders. And maybe even he's acting in a way that you don't understand. But generally speaking, Vaishnava, we cannot judge him very easily. You should not judge the Vaishnava or the Guru. The verse, Vaishnava Bhagena Vijaya. One should not judge the Vaishnava. It's very difficult, actually, even to judge another devotee, or anyone for that matter. You should be very careful about passing judgments on other devotees. That's why I say this. Maharaj Nimi was in a very difficult situation. He had extreme intelligence. And we see Maharaj Nimi in this situation actually is turning out to be the more advanced person, because when he's given the opportunity to take birth again, he doesn't take that opportunity. He says, no, I don't want to. Please do not imprison me again in this material body, in a material body. He doesn't want to take birth again. But Vasishta, on the other hand, he takes birth again. So the qualification, actually, of the guru is that he has to be able to deliver the disciple from repeated birth and death. Guru nasya set swashano nasya set pita nasya syas janani nasya set daivam natatsyan napatischa sasyan namochedya samapeta mrityum. One who cannot deliver his dependents from the path of repeated birth and death should never become a spiritual master, a relative, a father, a husband, a mother, or a worshipable demigod. So basically, anyone who's in a position of authority, as a father, a husband, you could say even as a temple president, he can't deliver his dependents from the path of repeated birth and death, he shouldn't take up that position. So the other cases of this kind of thing happening are the one that we remember perhaps a lot is the case of Shukracharya and Bali Maharaj. Bali Maharaj was actually a great devotee, although he came in the family of demons. He was the grandson of Prahlad Maharaj. Of course, Prahlad Maharaj is a great devotee, but that whole dynasty was an Asura dynasty. Bali Maharaj had actually conquered all the heavenly planets and was sitting on the throne of King Indra. And so then the only way out of that situation was that then Vamanadev appeared. Vamana is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he came to Bali Maharaj and he begged from him 3 paces of land. Vamana appeared as a brahmachari. And so that doesn't seem like very much. Oh, 3 paces of land, anybody can give 3 paces of land. Bali Maharaj had the entire Swargaloka and the entire earth planet under his dominion. To give him 3 paces of land, there's nothing. So what's the problem? So then Bali Maharaj says, take whatever you want. But then Shukracharya, who's the priest and guru of Bali Maharaj, warns him. Actually, Shukracharya had enough intelligence to realize that this was Vamanadev was actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he directly tells Bali Maharaj, this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Bali Maharaj also must have known that Vamana is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in various ways, Shukracharya, in several verses, first of all warns them that if you give away these 3 paces of land, you're going to lose everything. Furthermore, and then he tries to justify it in various ways to try to convince Bali Maharaj not to give away the land. But what was his motive in doing this? His motive was, once again, money. And position. He knew that if Bali Maharaj gets deposed from the throne, then his family is going to have less money. So this is called Smarta Brahmana. Prabhupada explained in those verses that this Shukracharya was actually Smarta Brahmana. And similarly, this Vasishta, although Prabhupada doesn't say it, he's become Smarta Brahmana also. Or actually, he's even losing Brahminical principles, even worse maybe. The religious principle for a Brahmana is that he should not be greedy at all. But Vasishta is greedy for these contributions from Indra, the king of heaven. So Shukracharya, Prabhupada says, when Shukracharya saw that Bali Maharaj had risked all his possessions, he understood that this would cause havoc not only to the king, Bali, but also to the family of Shukracharya, who was dependent on Bali Maharaj's mercy. So this is the difference between a Vaishnava and a Smarta Brahmana. A Smarta Brahmana is always interested in material profit, whereas a Vaishnava is interested only in satisfying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We see this Vasishta is also, he's only interested in material profit. But in the situation of Bali Maharaj, it was even more severe because the Supreme Lord had come personally to Bali Maharaj and begged him for land, and for then to Bali Maharaj to say, to actually not keep his promise was a very serious matter. So you could say the situation with Shukracharya and Bali Maharaj was even more serious than this one with Vasishta and Maharaj Nimi. The whole goal of spiritual life is to satisfy the Supreme Lord. When the Supreme Lord comes to you, then you should try to satisfy him. If the Supreme Lord comes to you and asks for 3 paces of land, you should give it and satisfy him. The whole goal of life is to satisfy the Supreme Lord. Atashri Krishna Nama, how does it go? All the varnashram, all the varnas and ashramas and so on, they're all meant to satisfy the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, simply following varnashram is a waste of time. So we can see that if the Guru tells you not to honor a promise and not to satisfy the Supreme Lord, then he's no longer acting as a Guru anymore. So then you can disobey the instruction. Otherwise, one should never disobey the orders of the spiritual master. One should take them as one's heart and soul. Prabhupada, he says the reason why he was successful and his only credit was that he took the order of his spiritual master as his heart and soul. But in these cases, the spiritual master is not advising the disciple to satisfy the Supreme Lord. You could say even this sacrifice was meant to satisfy the Lord, so it's not all that much different than the case of Bali Maharaj. Jai Sri Garanthraj ki jai. Shri Jagannath, Shri Radha Rasa Bihari ji ki jai. Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki jai. Maharaj Nimi wanted to perform this sacrifice, a yajna. What's the purpose of yajna? To satisfy the Lord. We don't get too much details about this sacrificial performance. We only know he wanted to do yajna. But certainly this yajna must have been for the satisfaction of Vishnu. But then Vasishta says, wait, I'll come back and I'll do this. And so maybe you should have waited. But no, Prabhupada actually justifies, he says, the first yesterday actually that was studied, the duration of he quotes Chanakya Pandit, the duration of one's life in the material world may end at any moment. But if within this life one does something worthy, that qualification is depicted in history eternally. Maharaj Nimi knew this. In the human form of life, one should perform activities in such a way that at the end, he goes back home, back to Godhead. But Maharaj Nimi didn't want to postpone that. We see here the other problem was that this Brahmana Vashishta became greedy. Bhagavad Gita warns us about greed. Greed is one of the gates to hell. Shividam narakasyedam doram nashasam atmanaha kama krodas talobas tasmadeta trayam tiyajet. There are three gates leading to this hell: lust, anger, and greed. Every sane man should give these up, for they lead to the degradation of the soul. We have to give up lobha. Lobha means greed. Also lust and krodha. Bhagavad Gita says everything starts by meditating on the senses. By meditating on the senses, on the objects of the senses, one gets attachment for them. This basic fall down of the living entity is given there in the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita. By meditating on the objects of the senses, one has attachment for them. And then from attachment, lust arises. So you can see, you can keep lust out of your heart if you simply focus your attention on something else, namely the Supreme Lord and His service. If you let your attention become deflected to the objects of the senses, then one will get attachment for them, and lust will come. And then from lust, anger will arise, and then one will fall down, as has happened in this case. We can see also, we can understand, and Bhagavad Gita gives us the qualities of the Brahmana. Shamodamas saucham, sochira shamodamas saucham. Brahmana should be self-controlled. You should be tolerant. You should be truthful. Santir arjavam evacha. Jnanam, you should have knowledge. Big jnanam. You should have realized knowledge. These are the qualities by which the Brahmanas work. We see this Vashishta was no longer was missing these qualities of the Brahmana. He became greedy. We have to be careful that these modes of passion and ignorance don't enter the heart. This greed is a sign of passion. The mode of passion is increased in the heart of Vashishta. How can we keep this mode of passion out of the heart? That is by this hearing and chanting. Shanmatam sakata Krishna punya shravana kirtanaha vidunodi suritsatam. By hearing and chanting, one cleanses the heart of all material desires. But how do you get attachment for this hearing and chanting? That's by rendering of service to the Mahatma. And that's in just the verse before that makes that point, that one should do Mahat Seva. By rendering of service to the Spirit, to the great devotee, then one gets attachment for hearing the messages of Vasudeva. Once you get attachment for hearing the messages of Vasudeva, then one's heart becomes cleansed. Satam prasangan mamavirya sambido. By hearing Bhagavatam and the association of devotees, one makes progress on the path of liberation. Satam prasangan mamavirya sambido bhavanti ritkarna rasayana kataha. Bhavanti ritkarna. It's very pleasing to the ear and the heart. And then one makes progress. Ta yoshana rashuva pravargavartmani. And then shada bhaktir Shraddha Rati Bhaktir. This Shraddha, first of all, appreciation and faith come, and then Rati, or attachment, and then Bhakti. So if we don't engage in hearing and chanting, then the greed will arise in our heart. First of all, the mode of passion will arise. And then when the mode of passion comes, then lust comes, and anger comes, and greed comes. And then the path to hell opens up. And the association is also very important. Who is Vasishtha associating with? He's associating with the demigods. Naturally, he's their guru. He's associating with King Indra. But Indra is a Sakama devotee. He's a bhakta, but he has material desires. So therefore, his association is not good. He should associate with the pure devotees. Of course, this Vasishtha is not an ordinary personality. He's far greater than us, even though he got into this bad situation of being greedy. Still, he's even superior to our situation. So we should be respectful also to him. We see his name come up so many times in Bhagavatam. Now, the other cases of disobeying the orders of an authority, there's two more that can be mentioned. One case is that of Prahlad Maharaj. His father says, take up material activity. Hear from your teachers, Shanda and Amarka. But Prahlad Maharaj doesn't take that instruction of his father. Ordinarily, you should obey the orders of your father. Of course, in this day and age, people don't pay attention to what their father says. But that's a good reason, because in the ancient time, the father is supposed to deliver the dependent from the path of repeated birth and death. You shouldn't become a father if you can't deliver your dependents. And that's the point of that verse I quoted earlier. Pita nasya syaj. If you can't, na mochiyad ya samapaitum mrityum. If you can't deliver your dependent, your son and daughters, from the path of repeated birth, then don't become a father, don't become a mother, don't become a guru, and so on. So, Hiranyakashipu told Prahlad Maharaj to stop practicing bhakti. He hated Vishnu. Vishnu had killed Hiranyakashipu's brother, Hiranyaksha. And so Hiranyakashipu wanted to kill Vishnu. Of course, it's impossible to kill the Supreme Lord, but he wanted to do that. And so and then Prahlad Maharaj, he was instructing his classmates also in bhakti, teaching them about hearing and chanting, and the breaks and so on, they would start engaging in kirtan. And so not only was he practicing bhakti, but he was distracting his classmates also. And so they had a big problem. So then Hiranyakashipu got very angry at his son. He tried to kill him in so many ways. And of course we all know the story of how Hiranyakashipu was killed by Lord Nrsingadev. But that's a case. Prahlad Maharaj didn't take the instruction of his father, who's otherwise in a superior position, and one should obey the orders of one's father. But no, he didn't do that, because he was not in the position of guru. He was giving him bad instruction. So we have to have the intelligence to recognize what's the right path and wrong path. But still, we should be very careful. Whenever the authority gives us some instruction, we shouldn't be casually think, oh, there's something wrong with this, I'm going to disobey it, thinking of these cases. These are very exceptional cases. Our intelligence is not as great as Maharaj Nimi and Prahlad Maharaj and so on. We may not be able to discern what is the right thing to do. So we have to be very careful. We don't want to make an offense to the spiritual master. Normally, the spiritual master wouldn't ever make these kinds of mistakes. So then, there's one more case that we can remember that Prabhupada actually mentions in one place. And that's the case of Bharat Maharaj. You may remember that Kaikeyi, who was one of Dasharatha's wives, at the time when Ramachandra was going to be coronated, Kaikeyi got some bad instructions from this maidservant Manthara to some advice, you could say. She was telling her, no, you should take your boon, because Kaikeyi had gotten these boons from a distant time that she could take whenever she wanted. So then she had this boon that she could ask anything she wanted from her husband at the right time, because she had rendered some service in the distant past and she had gotten these boons. So then this evil Manthara told Kaikeyi, no, you should ask for Bharat to be installed, because he's your son. Bharat is the son of Kaikeyi. Ramachandra is the son of Kaushalya. So you should get your son put on the throne, because your son will be neglected if Ram is enthroned. So on the day that Ramachandra is supposed to be coronated, Kaikeyi tells her husband, Dasharatha, now you should install Bharat on the throne. And not only that, you should banish Ramachandra to the forest, because otherwise he'll try to take over. So Ramachandra then, without any hesitation, said, okay, I will go to the forest. And Bharat can be enthroned. Yet he didn't even question it for a minute. On the other hand, his brother Lakshman was very angry, which is the correct thing. When you're offended, you shouldn't protest. But when the Supreme Lord or the devotee is offended, you should protest. So Lakshman was very angry. And at that time, Bharat was not in Ayodhya. He was out of Ayodhya in a distant place. So then Dasharatha very reluctantly had to banish Ramachandra. And Ramachandra left, and then they sent for Bharat Maharaj, and Bharat Maharaj returned. And Bharat Maharaj didn't want to accept the throne at all. Even though his mother, the key point is his mother wanted him to accept the throne. That was her whole plan. But he didn't want to accept the throne. He tells his mother, since you have committed a hideous sin, you shall surely reside in hell. There you shall wail endlessly, with none of your desired objects. Do not say anything to me, evil lady. I hereby desert you. You are neither my mother nor the emperor's wife. Without doubt, you are a wicked Rakshasi who entered my family in the guise of a relation. You shouldn't tell that to your mother ordinarily, would you? No. You don't say such harsh words to an authority, your mother or your father, your guru. You don't counter-curse your guru and tell him to die. Such things are never done, except in these exceptional cases. Ramachandra is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but also this Bharat is also in the Vishnu category. So he disobeys the order of his mother. His mother wanted him to be enthroned, but he didn't want that at all. And so then, Bharat actually then, by that time, Ramachandra had gone a long distance away. I think to Chitrakoot by that time. He had already, and he was staying with this Guha, who was a Nishada king. So then, Bharat Maharaj took a whole army to see Ramachandra, and he says, okay, now we'll do the coronation of Ramachandra in the forest. So then they build a special highway, and they take this whole army to Ramachandra. And Bharat goes to Ramachandra and pleads with him to accept the throne. And they're ready to coronate him right there in the middle of the forest and bring him back to Ayodhya. All the residents of Ayodhya were extremely unhappy that Ramachandra left. He was very dear to all of them, and all of them were lamenting tremendously. When Bharat returned to Ayodhya, he saw that everything, the shops were all closed, the deities were not being worshipped properly. Everyone became very, very depressed on Ramachandra leaving. So Bharat then begs Ram to accept the throne. But Ramachandra is a greatly pious, very much concerned with moral codes and so on. So he refuses steadfastly. And Bharat finally goes and sits. At one point, Bharat goes outside his cottage and just sits down and just refuses to do anything. But finally, Bharat gives up. And then he works out a compromise. Bharat then brought before Ram a pair of ornate wooden sandals embellished with gold. He put them on the ground and said, "Please place your feet in these sandals, dear Ram. Let these shoes be the ruler of the kingdom, and I shall remain as their servant." So then Ram put the sandals on and took them off again. And then Bharat placed them on his head and took them back to Ayodhya. And so then the sandals are the king, and he served the sandals. So in this way, Bharat never accepted the throne, in spite of his mother instructing him to do so. So that's another case then of someone rejecting the authority. But as I say, if somehow your spiritual master in the future gives you a very difficult instruction and you don't want to follow it, don't say to him all these historical incidents and say, "No, I don't want to do it." There has to be a very good reason to reject that order, extremely good reason. And my point is that these personalities are extremely intelligent. Nimi Maharaj was greatly intelligent. He could understand why Vasishtha was acting the way he was. Here we get all information. Prabhupada has explained everything for us, but I'm sure Maharaj Nimi, he couldn't understand very clearly immediately. He had to use his intelligence. He had to get inspiration from the Paramatma how to act properly. We see also in the case of Bali Maharaj, it says specifically in Bhagavatam that Bali Maharaj stopped. After Bali Maharaj, first of all, Bali Maharaj had said, "Okay, now I will promise take anything you want," he told Vamana, 3 paces of land. Then Shukracharya gives a long lecture about why he shouldn't do that. And then Bali Maharaj stopped. He didn't actually give an immediate response. He stopped and thought for a while about it. So similarly, we have to think always in devotional service, especially at such crucial moments as disobeying the orders of the spiritual master. We have to think very, very carefully about doing such a thing. There has to be a very, very good reason. In this case, in the case of Shukracharya, was telling Bali Maharaj not to satisfy the Supreme Lord. They both knew that this Vamana was the Supreme Lord, and he tells him not to satisfy him. In the case of Maharaj Nimi, he's telling him to delay a sacrifice. So in this way, we have to be very intelligent in spiritual life. Spiritual life is a razor's edge. So by all means, obey the order of your spiritual master. Any questions? Bhagavatam is about question and answers. We see all the Bhagavatam is questioning and answering. Even in other literatures of the ancient time were also question and answers. Modern literature is more like people just say whatever they want. But you see, the process of Bhagavatam is question and answers, and then more comes out. I see that practically.
Prabhuji, you compared the two more situations along with this disobedience, Bali Maharaj and Vamanadev section, and Prahlad Maharaj and the Hiranyakashipu. But in those cases, we have seen there is no counter curse. So, as being the Nimi Maharaj is a great devotee or whatever you mentioned. So, how he could counter curse, means how he, the situation, how to understand in the both cases. Can you elaborate?
Well, we don't know very much about the capabilities, you could say, of these other personalities, Bali Maharaj and so on, whether they were capable of counter-cursing, we don't know. But that was a different situation also, because here, Maharaj Nimi was cursed to die by Vasishta, so then he retaliates, gives it a counter-curse. But Bali Maharaj was different. Shukracharya didn't curse him to die, he just said, don't follow that instruction. So there's differences there. It seems like, the situation of Bali Maharaj and Shukracharya seems to be more severe than this one, because in that situation, Vamana is personally and present in front of them. Whereas in this situation, they were fighting about this sacrifice. Of course, the sacrifice is meant for Vishnu.
We heard somewhere that whenever superior is there, even he does some mistake, still junior should not find the mistake or counter curse. This principle is one side, and this another is slokanas guruna sasyat sojanuna sasyat. So these both are like a difference. So how to weight that which is heavy and like this?
I think it's going to depend on the situation very much. Here, at least in these situations, we get specific information. I think it's important, especially in our condition, where we don't have very much intelligence, where we're not very pure ourselves. These personalities like Bali Maharaj and Maharaj Nimi, they're great personalities. They're already pure themselves. But we're not pure. If somebody tells us to do something, or gives us some instruction which is hard to find, we don't have the intelligence to discern what's the correct thing to do. Maybe Krishna will tell us. But generally speaking, the principle should be that if somebody makes a mistake, I think that has to be the first priority. If Guru seems to make a mistake, better to let it go than to try to get involved in some kind of a criticism or something like that, because even you see these great devotees like Jayananda and so on, they would never criticize devotees, even when they would make a mistake. So one moral there is, unless you're in the management, no need to criticize authorities and so on. Maybe if you're a GBC member or something like that, then you have a management position, you have to get involved in that sort of thing. But generally speaking, criticism of a Vaishnava, even when he's made some mistake, is a very dangerous thing. It's an offense against the holy name even. So that first principle, I think, is that we should operate with somebody makes a mistake, some authority makes a mistake, better to let it go than to criticize or try to curse or whatever. Of course, we don't have any power to curse anybody anyway. We have no Shakti whatsoever. But we have our tongue though, and the tongue can be a very dangerous thing also. Worse than a sword, you could say. There's a phrase like that, the pen is mightier than the sword. And nowadays you have this internet, whatever you say gets propagated out into the internet and you can't remove it. And you see these devotees that, I remember in one particular case, somebody said some critical thing about a devotee. Maybe it was about 15 years ago. And that's still on the internet. It has something that I was involved in. So it's still there on the internet 15 years ago in solid, black and white. So when you put things on the internet, be careful. They're going to be there, could be there for a long, long time. So you get involved in an offense very easily that way. Yeah.
Hare Krishna. If somebody don't have enough intelligence to discriminate, then his spiritual life will spoil, because he must have that intelligence. So how he can get that intelligence? Because without intelligence he cannot discriminate what is right, what is wrong. If he don't have don't know about what is right, what is wrong, so he may go wrongly and his future will spoil. So it is very, very dangerous also.
Well, Krishna is the source of all intelligence, so we really have to depend on Krishna in those situations. Depends on the situation, like I say, very much. We've seen in our movement some gurus have done some bad things in the past. They were asked to leave by the management. That happens sometimes. But those were difficult situations too. To ask somebody to leave ISKCON and so on, it's a very severe thing. So this shouldn't be taken as a casual action. It should be taken after great deliberation, which I was making that point. You see, another case also, there's one other case of where the authority does something bad, and that's when Brahma, he looks lustfully at his daughter Vak. And so then after that, then the sons of Brahma, who were the sons? They approached Brahma and questioned that. They didn't let it go. But the key word there is when they approached him, they did so very humbly. It says that in Bhagavatam. So that's another case of the authority doing something wrong, and then what did the disciples do? They didn't let it go. But then again, they weren't very mean about it either. They were very, very humble. And then eventually Brahma cast off his body and took another body because of that error. Anything else?
We heard that anger, whenever there is a spiritual cause, we can become angry sometime. So, as Bhagavad Gita states that, Krodhat bhavati sammoha. When we become angry for spiritual cause, will it not arise the sammoha? Or if not, then how?
Well, as a general rule, we should control the anger. We see even these personalities who display anger, say Hanuman and so on, although they may become angry, their anger is under control. Prabhupada also became very angry sometimes at his disciples, but it was under control. One minute he would be angry, the next moment it was like nothing happened, and he didn't hold any grudges either. As a general rule, though, we shouldn't become angry just because we want something in ISKCON. You have to ask yourself, why did you want that thing anyway? What's your goal? Why are you becoming angry about something? But generally we should we should be very respectful to devotees. If we want something, we should humbly request it, and rather than to become angry. Because we see anger contaminates the consciousness and so on. As you're saying, it's a cause of fall down. So as a general rule, don't become angry. Anything else? Otherwise, 9 o'clock. Garanthraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, La Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol.